Right, hi everyone, thanks very much for coming along. We'll get started now. So welcome to our Anthropology Open Day in Durham. My name is Dr. Sally Streets. I'm one of the lecturers here in biological anthropology, and I'm also the Department Director for Recruitment and Admissions. So I should know the answer to most of your questions. If I don't know, I will follow up, and you're always welcome to contact me down the line. While you're here, I would also strongly recommend, if you haven't already, that you visit other places on campus, particularly the Teaching and Learning Centre, where I think they have people from admissions and from extracurricular activities and so on. They're the best people to go to if you've got like general queries about life in Durham, the college system, the admissions process, all that kind of thing, whereas I'm best to speak to you about like the department and the degrees that we offer. So this actually isn't the anthropology department, this building. This is a kind of generic space that we use for teaching, and there's the cafes and stuff as well. Our department's actually over there, and the roof is covered in construction work at the moment. It's pretty noisy, which is why we're in here. But I would encourage you to have a look around the department as well. There'll be a tour leaving from here at 1:30. So if you want to hang around after the talk, one of my colleagues will come and show you around the building as well. I'm also going to be joined in a bit by one of our student ambassadors, but I suspect that at the moment he's stuck in a very long coffee queue, so he'll be up in a bit. Right, so what I'll do in this talk is start by just telling you a bit about anthropology in general, because I suspect that most of you probably haven't studied anthropology before. Hi, come in, it's all right. Has anyone studied anthropology before out of interest? Oh, brilliant. Oh, excellent. Whereabouts? What do you do? Here. Oh, fantastic. Oh, okay. I'd love to speak to you afterwards about... It'll be interesting to see what's changed. Okay. So that's what I would assume. I assume most people have not studied anthropology before. That's completely fine. We have students coming to us from all different backgrounds. Then after I've talked a bit about anthropology in general, I'll start to talk about anthropology specifically in Durham and what it looks like and what makes it different from anthropology in other places. Then I'll talk a bit about how we try to ensure our teaching is as inclusive as possible. Then I'll talk a bit about career prospects, and then I'll hand over to Simon when he gets back to talk to you about his experiences studying with us. So let's start then with the obvious place. What actually is anthropology? So the literal translation is simply the study of humans, which isn't that helpful, obviously, because a lot of subjects profess to study humans, history, psychology, sociology, and so on. So what is it that makes anthropology distinctive compared with other subjects? What makes anthropology distinctive is essentially its breadth. So it's a very holistic subject, it's very broad. We study humanity from multiple different perspectives, including both biological and social, which is something that sets us apart from sociology, for example. So it's quite aptly described by Alfred Kreuber as, he was a 20th century American anthropologist, as the most humanistic of the sciences and the most scientific of the humanities. That quote is particularly useful because it really captures the position of anthropology as not straightforwardly a science subject or an art subject or a humanities subject. It's kind of at the intersection of all of them. And basically what we're really interested in is kind of more questions, right, rather than like disciplinary boundaries, I'd say. I think it's fair to say that the sort of popular image of an anthropologist remains something a bit like the one you can see on the screen. So this is a picture of a writer and broadcaster called Will Millard. I don't want to pick on him in particular. This is quite a typical scene from a lot of documentaries that you'll see in popular media about anthropology. So it was called My Year with Tribe. It was on BBC in 2018. Did anyone see this out of interest? No, maybe one. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So this is how it was described on the website. Writer Will Millard visits the treehouse-dwelling Korowai tribe in Papua, Indonesia, to try to understand the pressures they face as they move into the modern world. So there's a few things that this kind of image and this conception of anthropology gets right. The main thing is that we really do place an emphasis on field work, particularly this kind of long-term immersive field work where you spend a lot of time living very closely with the people that you're studying and trying to kind of understand how they live their everyday lives. What we don't like so much about this image of anthropology is that it does represent a kind of outdated and slightly troubling image of anthropology, which is one in which primarily Western researchers, primarily white researchers, travel to so-called remote or exotic locations. They work with people who are very unfamiliar to them. They make their observations, they do their research, they get their footage, whatever it is they need, and then they leave. And they go home and they then distribute this newfound knowledge to their own communities, usually academic communities or sometimes popular audiences. And while that kind of research is very rewarding for the researcher, what worries us about that mode of research is that it prioritises our interests as the researcher over those of the people that we study, right? So this is something we're trying to kind of challenge and move away from in anthropology to a place where the people that we work with are on a more, not an equal footing or a more empowered position, right, compared to how it's been done historically. So the reality of anthropology today is quite different. There's a, as I'll talk about later, that kind of practice has a long legacy, but it is different today in many ways. So we do still do a lot of fieldwork. We do place a lot of emphasis on fieldwork, but you can do fieldwork anywhere. It doesn't have to be with people you're not familiar with. It can be with people who live in forests. It can be with people who live in cities. It can be, anywhere you can find people, right? You can do anthropology. We also don't only work with humans, we also work with close relatives of humans, like non-human primates. We don't only work with living humans, we also work with human remains, so human ancestors and extinct hominin relatives, like Neanderthals, for example. And while you will find us in the field, we're not only interviewing people, we're also maybe observing people, or observing primates, maybe we're at archaeological digs. And you can also find us in a variety of other places. You can find us in the lab, doing archive research, or working in a variety of different kinds of institutions, like museums, healthcare institutions, and so on. And we as anthropologists ourselves are increasingly diverse, although as I'll talk about later, there's still quite a lot of work to be done there. Okay, so what I thought I'd do next is just break for a quick discussion exercise, and this kind of gives you an idea of the way a typical seminar might work at university, where we have a group that we kind of break up into smaller groups, you have a chat and then you come back together, sort of classic like think, pair, share kind of thing. And the question I'd like us to talk about is this one: why do we make music? Now, this is a pretty broad question, right? I've picked it for a few reasons. The evolution of music is something I'm really interested in my research and in my teaching. And one thing that fascinates me about music is just that it's very weird, and the more you think about it, the weirder it becomes, right? The fact that we spend so much time making music, listening to music, music is everywhere in our everyday lives. Some of us listen to it basically constantly in headphones, it's in films, it's in shops, and yet it doesn't have an obvious instrumental value, right? What does it do for us, right? And in evolutionary terms, it doesn't have an obvious benefit in terms of survival or reproductive fitness. So why on earth do we spend so much time doing it? What does it do for us? So I will give you 2 or 3 minutes now just to break up into pairs or little groups. You might have to move around a little bit, which is fine, and then I'll bring us back together and we can share some thoughts. And try and think about this, when I say think like an anthropologist, try and think about this broadly, so from both biological and social perspectives. Okay? I'll just give you a couple of minutes now.
Yes.
Okay, let's bring everyone back together. And obviously, just to be clear, there's not clear-cut answer to this question, right? The idea is I just want to get people talking. You might well be sitting next to your future course mates, and I want you to kind of get an idea of how we think as anthropologists. So any thoughts over here that you might want to share? Why do you make music?
I thought the groups about like distraction and escapism from
Interesting.
real life.
Right, distraction and escapism. So what kind of context are you thinking about when you think about people using music or escaping?
So I just like listening to it whilst in like a busy situation and like just calming down and listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you think something similar? Yeah, I think that's increasingly this is the case, especially in industrialised societies where increasingly the main mode of engaging with music is personalised private listening, like on your headphones when you're walking around, increasingly with the use of algorithms, right, that will present to you the music that's right for your mood and your emotions at a given time. And what's interesting about that is that it's super different from what music was like for like 99.999% of our species history, for however long we've had music. Where I would imagine it was a much more social enterprise. Thank you. Any other thoughts maybe from the middle of the room? Oh, go. Sorry, I'll come to you in a second.
It's like a mode of communication.
Yeah.
I think like emotional stories, stuff like that. And I think it's evolved from like classical music to even like rap about like social political issues these days.
Yeah.
And it's ways like bring people together.
Yeah. Brilliant. So two really important things going on that's very common in music. First of all, kind of personal expression, so individual emotional expression or political expression, but also group identity. How do you think music expresses like a group identity? How could it do that?
I think maybe like if you into like a genre and could like discuss like political or social issues, like for examples, but
Yeah.
like and can unite people together and like actually cause like it can help with activism, political and social change.
Yeah, it's very powerful. But what I find really interesting is why it's so powerful. Like, why is it that like a group of protesters sort of seem to make more of an impact if they're all singing together and making a huge noise? Right, that I find is still quite an interesting question. Thank you. I think there's one over here. Yes.
I was going to say communication as well.
Yes.
Just because it's transferable across language and cultural barriers.
Right. Yeah, this is a really interesting one, right? Because music doesn't have to have lyrics. So potentially it could be used for kind of cross-cultural communication in some way. Can you think of any examples?
Well, animals and such as birds communicate with music. So
Yeah, that is super interesting, right? Yeah, for animals, organised sound is mainly for communication, right? For like territory advertisement, finding mates and so on. Whether that is music is another really interesting question we could spend a long time discussing. I could go on about this all day, but any more last points before we move on? Any thoughts? Okay, cool. Thanks very much for your contributions. Again, I think what that shows is that there's not one answer right to this question, and we kind of need to think about something as complex as this from multiple perspectives, right? Both how did this evolve, where did it come from in our evolutionary history, what similar characteristics are there in non-human species, but also what functions does this play today, and how those functions vary between different contexts. So I think that really nicely captures the kind of endeavour of anthropology. Okay, so now moving on to what anthropology is like in Durham, and what makes us distinctive. So we are one of the largest departments in the UK, and we're also distinctively broad. The vast majority of other anthropology departments focus primarily on social anthropology, maybe with some archaeology, some biological anthropology, but usually those will be kind of more minority subjects. Whereas we're one of the few departments in the UK to give equal precedence to both biological and social anthropology, as well as the third subfield, which people are probably less familiar with, the anthropology of health. And we are interested not only in these areas as distinct subfields, but also the ways that they communicate with each other and the ways that they overlap. So, assuming that not everybody, although some people, are familiar with the kind of subtle nuances of the different subfields of anthropology, I'll just go over each of these in turn, starting with social anthropology. So social anthropology is the study of the diversity of human social and cultural life. It's the branch of anthropology that I think most people are most familiar with. It emphasises the study of people in the context of their everyday lives, and it uses primarily what's called the ethnographic method, particularly that kind of long-term immersive fieldwork that I was talking about at the beginning. Just to give you an idea of the kinds of topics that we teach in social anthropology, I'm going to include some example modules. Now, for full disclosure, module titles can change, but this is just to give you a kind of a flavour of the kinds of topics that we teach. So, for example, we have a first-year introductory module in social anthropology called People and Cultures. We have a second-year module in Kinship and Religion, and the last three are all more specialised third-year optional modules that you can choose from. And they've come from a longer list, but this is just to give you an idea. So here we've got violence and memory, anthropology, art and experience, and poison, pollution, and the chemical Anthropocene. So as you can see, things get a bit more specialised in the final year. So biological anthropology, on the other hand, is quite different. We study the evolution and biological variation of humans, as well as our relatives, both living primates and extinct hominins. Like our social colleagues, we are interested in human diversity and human behaviour, but we study it from a kind of longer lens. So we study it from an evolutionary perspective, how human sociality has evolved over time spans of thousands to millions of years, rather than kind of zooming in on a particular present day context. Our research is usually based in natural science methods, so usually we are doing quantitative research, we're testing hypotheses, we're doing statistics and so on. And some example modules that we currently offer in biological anthropology include human evolution and diversity, that's our introductory module in the first year, our place in nature, which is a second year module, kind of exploring comparisons between human behaviour and non-human primate behaviour. And then examples of third year specialised optional modules include human reproductive ecology, forensic anthropology, and primates in peril. And then the anthropology of health is probably the broadest of all of these areas. It's the study of health from both biological and social perspectives, which I think is really fantastic because health is so inherently an interdisciplinary issue. And because it's so broad, it intersects with a lot of other subjects, including those that are quite applied, so including global and public health, for example. And as the broadest of the three subfields, they are the broadest in terms of the research methods that they use as well. So they might use either quantitative or qualitative methods or a mix of the two. Current example modules in health include health, illness and society, the introductory module in first year, global health and disease, second year module, and the last three, again, are three examples of specialised optional modules in the third year, anthropology of tobacco, anthropology of health inequality, and evolutionary medicine. Something else that we really like to highlight on open days is our residential fieldwork modules. This is something that we're really proud of. So unusually, among at least UK anthropology departments, we offer all of our students the chance to go away on a residential fieldwork module. So this involves taking students for 7 to 10 days to their choice of a range of European destinations, where you will actually get the chance to put your anthropological theory and skills into practice. So learning how to do anthropological research in a very hands-on, practical way. This is fully funded, so there's no extra costs, it's already paid through the fees. And there's a virtual option for students who are unable to travel for one reason or another. So the destinations that we offer every year vary a little bit because of things like variation in staff availability and so on. But just to give you an idea of the kinds of places we go to, this year we're taking students to Malta, to Gibraltar, Cyprus and Fuerteventura. And we choose these places not just because they're nice places to visit, although they are, but also because they're places that each raise really interesting site-specific anthropological questions. And we usually have connections to local researchers and institutes as well, so we make sure that we have a bit of insider knowledge. So for example, we go to Gibraltar because it has Europe's only population of wild primates, so it allows our students to actually do primate observations. And not only that, but also study the kind of interesting interactions the primates have with humans. Has anyone been to Gibraltar and seen these primates in action? So you probably know they're not the wildest of primates. They probably eat quite a lot of fast food, and they steal sunglasses and iPhones and stuff off the tourists, which causes some really interesting kind of tensions for us to study. So there is a bit of small print which I must go through. I've told you the destinations can vary. What else do I need to tell you? So it's compulsory for students on the single honours anthropology degree programmes. For joint honours and other programmes you can still do it, although there are some restrictions. Basically you just have to choose the right prerequisites. If you're concerned about that, if you've got any questions, just ask me afterwards. And you only have funding for one residential field course throughout your whole degree. So for example, if you're doing anthropology and archaeology and they also offer a funded residential fieldwork course, you could only get the funding for one of them. So why do we do fieldwork? Well, it's really essential for our discipline. So a focus on fieldwork, like I said, is something that makes anthropology a little bit different from other social science subjects. We really do place a lot of emphasis on the value of kind of going out into the world and collecting data for yourselves. But beyond your anthropology degree, it's also a fantastic chance to develop really, really transferable skills in research. So learning how to interview people, right, to communicate across cultural barriers and so on. How to do research ethically and unobtrusively, how to understand people with different backgrounds to you, and so on. It's quite intensive, actually. It's not. Occasionally, we get students thinking it's going to be like a holiday, and it's not. It is quite hard work, but we do try and build in some downtime and some social activities as well to make sure that you have a bit of time to get to know your fellow students and staff. And I've been on one of these courses myself actually a few years ago, and I can honestly say it was really one of the most transformative experiences for me as a lecturer. I felt like it was the first time I really got a grip on who my students were and who they were outside of the classroom, their kind of common hopes and fears and so on, and I think it really made me a better educator. So our students also are really positive about these field courses. We get a lot of lovely feedback every year. Students saying things like, this was my favourite aspect of the degree, something I'll remember for the rest of my life. This is maybe my favourite one because I think it just really captures the value of fieldwork in a nutshell. So this person said, we got to actually experience both biological and social anthropology. It gave me an appreciation of fieldwork that you can't get by simply reading about it, and I think that's just spot on. Okay, so now I'm going to go over the structure of some of the degrees. I'm going to try to avoid too much of an information overload and just kind of give you the headlines. If you've got specific queries about module choices and so on, though, do grab me afterwards and I'll try my best to help you out. So is anyone interested in single honours anthropology? So just studying just anthropology or potentially health and human sciences? Yes, a few. Okay. So we have 3 different programmes. We have BA Anthropology, which focuses on social anthropology. We have BSc Anthropology, which focuses on bio. And then we have Health and Human Sciences, which focuses on the anthropology of health. In the first year, actually, all of these degrees start off the same. So you would do introductory modules in all 3 of the subfields, along with a research methods module and an elective from a different department. And the idea of this is to, first of all, give you a broad-based introduction to the subject, because I know it will be a new subject for the vast majority of people. But also, it's quite cleverly designed because it allows you to switch between the programmes quite easily, as long as you tell us you want to do this by the end of the first year. And this does happen quite a lot. So we quite often have students, for example, who come to us thinking, I'm a social sciences person, I'm a social anthropologist, I'm much more interested in the social side of things. And they get here and they find, actually, I really get on well with the biological aspects, or vice versa. And again, as long as they let us know by the end of the first year, then a switch between these programmes is no problem. Switching between other kinds of programmes is not guaranteed, but just between these single honours programmes is fine. So then in the second year, that's when things start to diverge. You will start to specialise a bit more in your chosen area, so you'll do 2 core modules in your chosen subfield of anthropology, either health, bio or social, depending on which programme you're on. But you also get a choice of 2 other modules from the other areas of anthropology, which is nice because it helps you both specialise while maintaining some breadth. And then you'll also do some further research methods and theory training, which prepares you for the 3rd year, in which your biggest, most challenging but hopefully most rewarding task is your dissertation, which is the chance for you to do your own piece of anthropological research. You'll get quite a lot of freedom actually to choose a topic that you're interested in, within obviously legal and ethical limitations. And that's also when you would do your residential fieldwork module, along with quite a wide choice of specialised modules from different areas of anthropology, depending on what you've done previously, and the chance to do another elective from a different department. So here, this is basically where everything comes together, and where you get the chance to really personalise your degree for what suits your own interests. And of course, like I said, the chance to, be creative and do your own research, right, as a fledgling anthropologist. So, anyone interested in joint honours programmes? Potentially, maybe? Yes, good. So, anthropology overlaps with a lot of other subjects by virtue of its breadth, but we've got particularly close ties with archaeology, with sociology and psychology here, which is why we offer joint honours degrees with them. The joint honours degrees with archaeology and psychology also includes integrated modules and the chance to do an interdisciplinary dissertation, for example, a dissertation in anthropology and archaeology, which is really nice because it helps kind of glue the two parts of the degree together a bit and make it a bit more cohesive. If you're thinking about BSc Anthropology and Psychology, something important to know is that it's BPS accredited, which is really important if you're considering a psychology career after you graduate. And I think I mentioned this already, but the field course that we offer is still available if you do a joint honours degree, although there are some prerequisites and limitations on funding. The best thing to do basically is just talk to us when you get here, and we'll help you make sure that you're choosing the right modules. Anyone interested in broader degree programmes like natural sciences, liberal arts? Yep, brilliant. Okay, oh, quite a few. Excellent. So again, because anthropology is so broad, it overlaps with pretty much any other subject you can think of, so it works great as part of a broader degree programme. These programmes are really, really broad and allow for a lot of flexibility and choice to make a very tailored programme. I think you can do up to 4 subjects on natural sciences and liberal arts, at least in the first and second year. They are quite complicated, so if you've got questions about those, you might be best off talking to the people from those degree programmes over in the TLC, which is just down there, rather than me, but I'll try my best if you have got questions. Yeah, and like I said, it does really work very well. We've had students combine anthropology with biology, with maths, with all kinds of combinations. And like with the joint honours, again, you can still do the field course, although some restrictions apply, like I mentioned before. So again, if that's really important to you, have a chat to me, and I can explain that in a bit more detail. Okay, so we try to teach our students using quite a diverse range of formats for classes and assessments, to try to cover a kind of diversity of skills, I guess, and learning preferences among students. And we also try to make sure that our assessments are kind of encouraging transferable skills, like the kind of skills that are actually going to be useful in workplaces and for further study. So we have quite a lot of emphasis on like kind of applied anthropology, quite a lot on research methods, research skills, that kind of thing. So just to give you an idea of what a typical module involves, most modules are 20 credits, at least in the first and second year. You'd have 6 of those per year, and each one would include 1 to 2 lectures per week and 2 to 4 seminars per term, or another smaller type of interactive class like a practical, for example. And on top of your classroom contact time, all staff will make themselves available for at least an hour a week for one-to-one guidance in what we call drop-in hours. So you can just come and have a chat to us about reading you're finding particularly difficult, an assessment you want some guidance on, how to request extensions, things like that. We're always very happy to chat to students. And we are really trying to kind of expand our assessment base beyond the sort of traditional university assessments. So we do use some traditional essays and exams. I think they do assess some important skills, but we are also trying to use a kind of more varied portfolio of assessments, including more of an emphasis on practical skills, particularly research projects, research proposals, posters, even podcasts or outreach activities. One of our assessments in third year involves creating a museum display, and another one involves a simulated crime scene for forensic anthropology, which is always like incredibly popular. Anyone interested in studying abroad, doing a work placement maybe? Excellent. So this is compatible with all of our degree programmes. All of them allow you to potentially spend a year studying abroad or doing a work placement, which is a great opportunity to gain some broader skills that kind of complement your anthropological training. This would take place between your second and third year, and you can actually apply after you start. So you could come here on a 3-year programme and apply to convert to a 4-year. I can't guarantee you'd necessarily get it. There are I think there's a minimum grade requirement, but you can at least apply. And for studying abroad, we have agreements with partner universities in quite a wide range of European countries, including Czechia, Estonia, France, Germany and Iceland, as well as some further afield, including Japan, Canada, USA, China and Australia. There's another bit of fine print here, which is that there are some restrictions on these schemes. So some of them are very competitive and there's not very many places. Some of them will give priority to language students or students who have ability in the local language. So if this is really important to you, I'd just suggest doing a bit more reading on it. There's a link at the bottom of the slide, or you could just Google something like Durham Global Study Abroad, and that page should pop up, and you can have a little look for yourselves. If you do a work placement, it could be something that's directly related to your degree, or it could be completely unrelated. Past examples are very diverse. They include things like working for conservation charities, in the fashion industry, for one of those online petition websites, and really, yeah, anything potentially that you can think of. Okay, so in this section, I'm just going to talk a little bit about inclusive teaching in anthropology. So as I alluded to earlier when I was talking about like popular conceptions of anthropology is inherently very challenging, right? Because we live in a very unequal world. We, as anthropologists, are humans. We are interested in studying other humans, and we are not completely objective actors, right, in our research. So we have particular experiences, particular biases that we bring to our research, whether we're aware of them or not. And this is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about in anthropology, and thinking about what best to do with that. And unfortunately, you don't have to do a very extensive Google search to find out that the history of anthropology is pretty ugly, the same as the history for a lot of other disciplines. You'll find a very uncomfortable history that is very closely entwined with colonialism and racism. So if you look, for example, at the kind of early founders of social anthropology, people like Bronislaw Malinowski, in the early 20th century working with Trobriand Islanders, what you'll see is a bit of a pattern. I don't want to pick on him specifically. He's kind of emblematic of a pattern, right, where what you'll get is, like I said at the beginning, you'll get primarily white Westerners studying primarily people of colour in colonised countries, right, in colonised contexts. Sometimes in situations where the research was actively working with colonial administrators to try and kind of smooth over relations, or, you know, with the indigenous people. And so, of course, that sets up inherently an unequal power dynamic, right? And it raises a lot of really troubling questions about the extent to which, you know, everybody knows this guy's name, nobody knows these people's name, no one knows who they are, no one knows whether they consented to this research, really. Did they know what the implications would be of getting involved in this research? Was it in their interests? That wasn't really the priority of the researcher, right, at the time. And again, I don't want to pick on Bronislaw Malinowski. We could say this about many early anthropologists. And this definitely isn't limited to social anthropology. In the history of biological anthropology, we'll also see many uncomfortable examples of research and many misuses of supposedly, you know, objective scientific measurements, like craniometry measurements, for example, that were used to justify kind of racist ideas about the superiority of some groups over others based on their head measurements. So it's difficult, and it's something that we have to face up to. And these days, anthropology, thankfully, looks quite a bit different from this, but this history has a long legacy, right, which is made abundantly clear by, you know, recent political events, right, in the news surrounding debates about decolonising the curriculum, for example, and so on. And this legacy is there whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And unfortunately, we can still see that anthropologists are not as diverse as we would hope they would be. So, for example, a survey from 2018 found that among American biological anthropologists, 87% of them are white compared to 63% of the US population. And you will also find on anthropology reading lists at university, along with many other subjects, you will still find that certain groups of scholars are overrepresented compared to others, particularly white and male, particularly those from the global north. So what are we doing about this? All of this really brings us to the present moment where you'll hear a lot of anthropology departments talking about decolonising. So I just wanted to spend just a minute or two trying to kind of slightly demystify this concept, because I think it's very easy to misunderstand, and I think in some cases it's deliberately misused. So what it isn't really is about kind of erasing history or like protecting people from offensive ideas necessarily. In fact, it's kind of the exact opposite. It's actually about like facing up to colonial history and challenging the ways in which it continues to exert a legacy over the research and teaching that we do today. So this is a really nice quote, I think, that summarises what decolonising is all about. This is from a historian at Oxford University Dr. Melissa Ono-George, who says that teaching practice is engaged, anti-racist and decolonial if it forces students, especially those comfortably in the majority, out of their comfort zones. So I think that really captures the spirit of decolonising very well. But this is an ongoing project, an ongoing conversation. So this all sounds a bit abstract. What are we actually doing? We have quite a few kind of department decolonising initiatives, which does include things like critically examining our reading lists. Although recognising that diversifying a reading list isn't enough by itself, it can be a bit of a tick box exercise. You need to kind of go deeper than that. We have a decolonising working group led by some of my colleagues. We have an optional third year module in decolonising anthropology, which is a really interesting one. It has a really unusual design where students are allowed to choose their own assessments as long as it meets certain learning outcomes. So that's quite a radical one. We also encourage all of our staff to go to related training events and workshops, things like anti-racism, for example. Something else we're doing is doing a kind of audit of our human skeletal collections. So we have a skeletal collection in our department. It's really useful for research and teaching. The skeletal remains themselves are of ethically dubious origin, so they primarily come from what was then a totally legal but ethically dubious trade in bones, primarily from South Asia. And so what we don't know a lot of the time is who these people were and whether they had any idea what would happen to their bodies after death. So this is something that we're considering at the moment. What do we do with these collections now that we have them? Is it appropriate to use them for research and teaching? Should they be repatriated? What's the best way to kind of show them the appropriate respect, right? Again, this is really difficult, but it's something that we have to face up to and talk about. This is also an area where we have a lot of student leadership. So we really try to encourage our students to help us understand how best to kind of shape the discipline for the better in the future. It's not something we don't want to be the ones telling the students, this is how you make anthropology better. This is what you must do to make anthropology more inclusive. It's really something where we want to empower students to work with us and share their own ideas and their own experiences, which we can learn a lot from. Okay, so we try really hard to make sure that we are as supportive a department as possible. All of our students get assigned an academic advisor who will offer personalised academic support, guidance and signposting in one-to-one meetings. You'd also get assigned a peer mentor who will be a student from an older year, ideally matched with you as much as possible by your degree pathway, whether you're an international student, whether you're a mature student. And this is something that a lot of our students find really helpful in kind of easing the transition to university, because of course the first year can be quite overwhelming, right, and quite daunting. It's just nice to know there's someone you can go to for a chat and you can ask them those questions that you don't necessarily want to ask your lecturer. We also have some dedicated support networks for first generation scholars and mature students in our department. So first generation scholars are those who are the first in their families to go to university, although we do actually use a kind of broader definition to include people who just don't have a lot of experience with university in their family backgrounds. We also have an anthropology society, which is pretty active. And again, what's really nice about these is a lot of these initiatives are co-led or led by students. So the peer mentoring scheme, for example, was I think initially proposed by a group of students, and then we helped them develop it. The Anthropology Society is student-led. The First Generation Scholars group is led by postgraduate students with support from staff. So if you do come to us and you see a gap, you think, why isn't the department doing more to support X type of students, then maybe that's something that you can help us set up. Okay, so just a little bit more from me before I pass you over to Simon, and then I think I've really talked enough. What are your career prospects if you study anthropology in Durham? And I can completely understand that some people might feel some trepidation, right, taking on a social science degree, especially in the current economic climate. And yeah, I'll be totally honest with you, there are some degrees that lead more predictably into a specific career path, like law and medicine, for example, compared to anthropology. With anthropology or any other subject like this, there's more risk, but there's also a far greater amount of flexibility and choice with what you can do. You can really do anything with an anthropology degree, I'd say. If you want statistics on employability and so on, please have a look at discoveryearly.gov.uk for more detail, but the headlines hopefully will provide a bit of reassurance. So between 80 and 95% of our students, depending on the degree, are in work or further study 15 months after graduation, based on latest graduate outcome survey stats, and they earn between £24,000 and £27,000 a year on average. And like I said, doing an anthropology degree gives you a very, very wide range of options. There's not really any such thing as the typical Durham anthropology graduates. So common destinations for our students include almost anything you can think of, really. Going to business, into the public service, the charity sector, postgraduate study, research, HR, education, finance, working for the NHS, for the police. I think I said charities already. Even in the health sector in a few cases. So really, it is really what you make it. And as cheesy as it kind of sounds, beyond the financial value of a degree in anthropology from Durham, although finances are important, there is a broader value. I think what an anthropology degree from Durham gives you is that it really changes the way you think about humanity. It gives you a kind of deeper appreciation for where humans came from, and why we are the way we are today. So a greater appreciation basically for what makes human societies, what we have in common, and what makes us different from one another. So this is really nicely summarised by Ruth Benedict, who was one of the kind of early founders of social anthropology. The purpose of anthropology is to make the world safe for human differences. And another nice one I'd like to finish on from Jim Yong Kim, who was the president of the World Bank in the 2010s and an anthropology graduate himself. So this is how he describes anthropology and the value of anthropology. We have to try to understand how people from a very different background see the world, and even if we don't agree with them, at least have some empathy for their particular worldview. I think that this is in fact the task of leaders in the world today, to spread that idea and ethic throughout the world. Anthropology, in my view, does that better than any other discipline, and I couldn't really say it any better myself. So, we'll now pass you over to our brilliant student ambassador, Simon Piercy, who is studying BSc Anthropology, and will tell you a bit about his experiences with us over the past couple of years. Should work now.
Yeah, until I put my finger on it and it'll stop again. Hello. So, as Sally said, I'm Simon, and I'm doing my BSc in Anthropology, just finished my second year and going into my third year. So I'm just going to chat to you about my experience as a university student at Durham, but also on the anthropology degree. So I always wanted to come to Durham. I didn't really stick in at school, clearly, because I'm at university at 39. I had a pub across the bridge from the castle in 2008, and I always said I want to get into Durham University and study, and some 15, 20 years later I managed it, finally, so I'm quite happy about that. But the thing about Durham is it's unique in that it's a collegiate college, which makes it a much more unique experience than going to any other normal college that is uni that isn't like Teesside or Newcastle. I say, and it rocks. So, anthropology, the course. What I love about anthropology is the fact that it makes you reconsider your preconceptions. So, being 39 when I initially started the degree, I thought I knew everything about kinship, about relationships, about society, about politics and things like that. And what anthropology has done has made me realise that actually I only really knew about what was socially appropriate to me and what I'd been taught through school and as I was growing up. And that isn't exactly how the rest of the world works. And so that's what really fascinated me. And so in my first year doing people and cultures, we looked at kinship systems. So for example, in the Trobriand Islands, the father of the child has nothing to do with the child whatsoever. It's all down the mother's line. The father has nothing to do whatsoever with the child, and as the male child grows up, he then gets passed to his mother's brother to bring up to be a man, which I never knew. I always thought that everybody had the mum and the dad, and that's just how it was. Doing anthropological research, again, was fascinating because that looked at something completely different. So that was looking at statistics and qualitative and quantitative data, and for that I looked at the Titanic and the disparity between first and second class passengers that died compared to third class passengers. Passengers, is that the right word? Yeah, it is, yeah. It just sounded weird in my accent for some reason. Evolution, variation and adaptation is a fascinating subject again, and it's brought on from the subject in first year, human evolution and diversity, where we look at how we've evolved, and we have lots of specimens in the labs of early hominins, like the Australopithecus and the Homo neanderthalensis, and things like that. So it's such a wide, varied subject, and the reason I chose to do it at Durham is because you cover all three subfields. And what I've found is I started off as a Bachelor of Science anthropologist looking mainly at the biological, but I've found that I'm also really now interested in the social aspect of anthropology. So in my third year I'm doing a social dissertation, but I'm still taking my biological subjects like forensic anthropology, so I can meld the two together, because you need to understand social and health to understand the biological and vice versa, is what I found anyway. So you look at things like health, culture, medicine, love, law, gifts, sports, relationships, different growth, love, and there's a wide variety of things. Anything that you can think of, we've been taught about or looked at or understood or been dissected. And that's what I love about anthropology as well, is the fact that it doesn't hide the past, it makes you confront the past and deconstruct the past, because there's no point in hiding it, because it happened. So we've got to just get on with it and face it, which is what I love. Also support-wise, so I said you've got colleges, so it's collegiate, so I'm in Castle College or University College, and within that you've got your own support structure, so you'll have mentors who are in years higher than you. There is a reverend if you're religious, there's a church, and there's student support. Again, within your own department, you've got your year tutor, so for example mine is Dr. Sally Street, and she's phenomenal, and so is Dr. Trudy Buck, who was amazing too, there's the peer support mentor, which is really useful, especially in your first year. I use that a lot in my first year, constantly bombarding her with questions on WhatsApp. And college-wide as well, so there's like counselling services within the university itself. There are classes on how to read academically, not learn to read, but academically read, how to write academically, on how to set out essays or scientific papers or things like that. And then, of course, the most important thing is, oh, I forgot about that one. There's pictures of different people. So this year, for example, in one of my classes, the anthropological research methods in action, I went to a zoo and observed primates. I did an online survey on politics. We watched a boxing match to deconstruct that, and also went to Beamish. So there's like a wide variety of scope within it. And then socially, Durham University has got so many clubs and societies, whether it be golf, Doctor Who, Quidditch, Harry Potter. We have Quidditch teams. I don't know why you want to run around the field on a broomstick, but there we go. So there's over 200 groups and societies within the Durham Student Union, and then the colleges themselves have got groups within that, and then your department also has groups. So if you can't find anything within 200 groups that's going to pique your interest, start your own group. It's perfectly acceptable, and just get people to join it. But being at Durham even, is pretty good, because they look after your education, your mental health, and they give you guidance, but they also offer fun, socials and activities, and also much, much more. And because you're in a collegiate, you not only socialise with the people within your college, but you'll also socialise with the people on your course, because they're all from different colleges. And it doesn't matter where you're from. So I'm a 39-year-old guy from the northeast of England, and Durham has this perception of being elitist. It isn't. Like, I'm a proper northerner, born and bred, camp, and I've had no problems with anybody whatsoever. You're just all integrated and everybody just gets on. I know you might think I'm just saying it, but it's true. I'm from the north, we speak the truth. So, you know, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't tell you. Thanks for listening. Any questions?